Our gospel today is from the Gospel of Luke, the 15th chapter. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling, saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So the father divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father, but while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get that fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called to one of the slaves and asked, 'What's going on?' He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he's got him back safe and sound.' Then the older brother became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" This is the gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. Well, some might call me a little bit awkward because I am really a big fan of cheesy get-to-know-you questions, especially when it comes to being in the company of people that I don't know very well. I love to throw in that oddball question to break the ice a little bit, to get to know someone else. I mean, these are things that have no direct relation to why we're actually meeting, like if you could travel anywhere in the world, where would it be? Or what is your comfort food of choice? Or one of my personal favorites, if you could have dinner with anyone past or present, who would it be and why? Think about that question for a moment. If you could have dinner with anyone past or present, who would it be and why? Now, you don't have to make this overly complicated. You don't have to plan the menu for this meal. Go with your gut reaction on this one. And I want to invite you to turn to a person or two near you. You get bonus points if you turn to somebody who is not somebody you came with. So it's okay to cross aisles a little bit. Share your name and who that lucky individual would be. Ready? Go for it. I love how this question has a lot of energy at the beginning and then it all gets quiet all at the same time. So is anyone willing to share who they would have dinner with? Oh, yeah? I hear some noise rumbling. Yeah. Walt Disney. Ooh, great one. Anybody else? Yeah, Tom. Jesus. You want to see Jesus? Yep. Last night, Pastor Peter said his mother. Yep. And then today he said Abraham Lincoln. So, I mean, it can change too. My current one would be the poet Mary Oliver. But besides who I'd actually pick, I find that I get far more excited about hearing what everybody else has to say, which might make the conversation even a little bit more awkward if I'm not contributing to it. But I love it because it expands my view of the world to think about Walt Disney or Jesus or Abraham Lincoln. And it shows that we all have different experiences. We all find value and meaning from different people and places. And we learn a little something about one another through a question that's fairly low risk. I mean, this is obviously not a question that we're asking for your deepest, darkest secret, but it's meant to build meaning and create relationships. Or depending on the answer, it might cut off that relationship. This is the context in which we hear a possibly really familiar parable today. Jesus' traveling and teaching has gathered the multitudes from everywhere, like you and me, gathering around tables for meals, or in homes, or in places of worship. Jesus brings together people who may not have normally spoken to one another. His words and reputation invite in the religious officials and the people of seemingly good faith, and also those who question and wonder, those who may feel far from faith, even those who may have felt a little bit shunned by their community, a little ostracized. The gospel goes so far as to name the tax collectors and the people whose sins and mistakes would have been known in the public, to show how he attracted those willing to risk the shame and humiliation to gather near him. They put themselves in awkward and sometimes risky situations, knowing that not everyone might receive them graciously. To be in the presence of Jesus at that time would not have necessarily been the sunshine and roses that we imagine it to be. But for some of those present, maybe there was nothing left to hide. Maybe with all of their cards on the table and nothing making their situation better, they felt that coming to Jesus was worth that risk. I mean, at the very least, they get to learn something new and there's people to be around. Do you ever have that feeling? Where you don't know what else to do, so you take that risk? Where you have nowhere else to turn, but you know that you can't stay there? I think we go through various times in our lives where we have that hunger, that thirst for something more. It could be a career shift. It could be wrestling with a mysterious diagnosis. It could be trying to figure out that relationship with someone you love but really don't like in that moment. It could even be dealing with that shame monster in your head from that mistake that you made years ago. Whatever your risky situation has been or is, remember that you don't face it alone. We all face deep hungers in our lives, whether it's the hunger for literal food and drink, causing us to not be the best version of ourselves, or it's the hunger for acceptance, love, and belonging, or the hunger for wealth, status, or recognition. It's those deep hungers that Jesus highlights in his parable to the tax collectors, the sinners, and the religious officials alike. If we look into the story that he tells, the younger of the two sons is hungry for freedom. From what we do not know, but we know that he risks his relationship with his father to find it. He asks for his portion of the inheritance, and without asking any questions or blinking an eye, the father grants him his desire, as if inheritances are given away before a person is deceased. There were no conditions, no requirements, just a simple, what's mine is yours. And then once out in the world, the younger son experiences a different kind of hunger. This time the physical hunger from having lost all that he had. He finds whatever work he can to put food in his belly, and it isn't enough. And he becomes trapped in a different cycle, yearning for freedom once again. In some ways, it's hunger that leads him away, and it's hunger that brings him back again. And then there's that older brother, the one hungry for fairness, for justice, and maybe even filled with a little bit of jealousy. When he comes in from that hard day of working in the fields and manual labor, he learns that his wild younger brother is back again, and his father has once again given him above and beyond anything that is expected or hoped for. Some might say he gets downright hangry, bouts of anger caused by hunger, and refuses to even look at his brother. Here, too, the father of the story meets him where he's at, listens to his deepest needs, his frustrations, his hungers, and then lavishes upon him blessings, saying, "You are always with me. What is mine is yours. Let us rejoice that the lost has been found." Now, I don't know about you, but I want to know what happens after these moments. Did the older brother go into the celebration? Did the younger brother change his ways and start behaving in the ways that I really want him to? Do they become role models for us today, or people that we would actually want to have dinner with? I mean, dare I ask, do they end up deserving the gifts that they have been given? Now, unfortunately for my wandering mind, there's no amount of reading or rereading of this parable that gives us the answer. We don't get to know if their hungers were satisfied or if they continued to make poor decisions. We don't get to know if the father's love was enough for them. And I wonder, like both children in the parable, if we are constantly seeking to satisfy that hunger in our hearts also. Almost as if we have this God-shaped space in our hearts that we continually try to put other things into, trying to earn that love through our actions or deeds or even our thoughts, worrying about how to be right or good or perfect, maybe even pushing ourselves to that breaking point where we don't recognize our own actions anymore. It's in those moments where we're so desperate to earn God's love, we forget about the most important part of the story. I'd say it's a spoiler alert, but you've already heard it. The main part of the story is not which son we identify with more, nor is it actually about our hungers or our specific actions or our deeds. The main point of the story is about this earth-shaking, running to meet you, radically extravagant love that is freely given. I mean, notice how the father doesn't question either son, but reminds them that there is nothing that they can do that will separate them from this love. Notice how he doesn't impose upon them how to fill their hungry hearts. Instead just says, "All that is mine is yours. All that I am is here for you. I will never leave you nor forsake you." And maybe that's one of the calls this Lenten season, as we journey towards Jesus' death on a cross, to remember that God's love isn't earned, but given. To remember that when we hear that we are loved, what it feels like to actually believe it. In a few short weeks, we're going to recall that Jesus' life is going to take a turn for the worse. It's that time of year. We're going to feel the tensions rise as he gathers with the disciples for a final meal, as he's put on trial, as he's eventually executed. We can even wonder how we would act in these situations, possibly feeling guilt-driven, lost, or forsaken. But if we pause today, we can remember that our own actions aren't the main point of the story. When hungers strike, we can turn to the one who will always fill our needs and fill that God-shaped space in our hearts, if we let God. we can be moved from trying to earn and gain into a space where we can find freedom from the things that keep us from feeling wholeness. And we can be confident in our relationship with a God who breaks down every barrier and welcomes the risks that we take, even if we make mistakes sometimes. So this Lenten season, may you be filled with holy wonder about the one who loves you beyond measure and sends you into this beautiful, broken, and sometimes awkward world. Amen.